The Breewood Watershed was identified in Montgomery County's 2010 MS4 permit for a comprehensive restoration effort. In addition to satisfying the MS4 permit requirements, the Breewood Watershed Restoration Project and others in the Sligo Creek watershed are part of a larger regional effort to improve water quality in the Anacostia River, which Montgomery County is committed to. We will highlight some of the other LID projects in the Sligo Creek watershed later in this video. In 2009, the Montgomery County Department of Environmental Protection embarked on a multifaceted effort to reverse decades of neglect and improve water quality and habitat conditions in a small tributary to Sligo Creek called the Breewood Tributary. Breewood Watershed. Located east of Wheaton at the intersection of University Boulevard and Arcola Avenue, the Breewood Watershed encompasses 64 acres of high-density suburban development that drains into the Breewood Tributary. Take a walk along the Breewood Tributary today, and what you will see is not at all how the stream looked just a short time ago. A neglected stream. In 1951, the Breewood Watershed consisted only of farm fields and forests. The following 20 years brought big changes to the watershed. By 1970, the houses, high-rises, schools, and roads that currently exist were built. Development in the county during this time did not include stormwater management. Impervious surfaces like roads, parking lots, and rooftops in the watershed went from almost zero in 1951 to 26 acres, or 42% of the watershed area, by 1970. Unmanaged stormwater runoff from these impervious surfaces flowed directly into the Breewood Tributary, causing an increase in the frequency of flooding and erosion of the stream channel. After 4 decades, the stream was severely eroded, with vertical stream banks as high as 13 feet. It's estimated that 2,667 cubic yards, or 267 dump truck loads of dirt, eroded into the stream channel during this 40-year period. On average, that's 1 truckload of dirt dumped into Sligo Creek every 2 months. A little help from friends. Through a collaborative effort involving multiple partners that included Montgomery County Parks, Friends of Sligo Creek, University Towers condominiums, Northwood Presbyterian Church, and residents in the Breewood Manor neighborhood, DEP implemented 5 projects in the Breewood watershed to address uncontrolled stormwater runoff and poor habitat condition in the stream itself. The 5 projects are University Towers and Northwood Presbyterian Church Stormwater Retrofits, Breewood Road Bioretention, Breewood Manor Green Streets, Breewood Stream Restoration, and RainScapes Projects on private property. University Towers and Northwood Presbyterian Church. Working together with residents at the University Towers and members of the Northwood Presbyterian Church, design plans were prepared for 13 small-scale stormwater management facilities. 12 facilities were installed at the University Towers and provide stormwater treatment for 3.7 acres of the 4.4-acre parking lot. Doug Marshall is the project planner with DEP and has worked on this project since the beginning in 2010.
Excavation under the pervious concrete panels went to a depth of 4 feet and was then backfilled with gravel. An overdrain was installed to ensure water drains out of the pores in the pervious concrete panels, thereby preventing damage to the concrete from freeze-thaw action during the wintertime. The gravel reservoir under the pervious concrete panels has enough storage capacity to hold the full water quality volume, or 1 inch of rainfall over a 24-hour period. Our observations during the 2 years these pervious concrete panels have been in place have shown that they're performing well in capturing the stormwater from a total of 1.22 acres of parking lot pavement. 6 tree boxes were installed at University Towers, which altogether provides water quality treatment for 1.9 acres of the parking lot. The impervious drainage area to each tree box ranges between 1/4 and 3/4 of an acre. Because of the relatively large impervious area draining to the tree boxes, we opted for a pre-treatment chamber to capture sediment and debris, keeping it from clogging the tree box filter media. Here's one of the tree boxes with the access doors to the sediment chamber open. Debris collected in the sediment chamber is easy to access and clean during routine maintenance visits. Through coordination with property management, we were able to have scheduled repaving of the parking lot delayed until after all LID practices were installed. When repaving did occur, we were able to include small modifications to ensure proper drainage to the tree boxes, such as the small concrete swale. Some of the speed bumps in the parking lot were relocated to direct stormwater into the tree boxes. In this case, we were able to have the speed bump installed at an angle to direct water to the tree box, which, as the video shows here, is working well. 2 bioretention gardens like this one and 1 rain garden were installed at the University Towers, which provide full water quality treatment for a total of 0.67 impervious acres. Here, one of the bioretention gardens is excavated to a depth of 5 feet and is then backfilled with 15 inches of gravel and 2 to 3 feet of soil media, which is comprised of equal parts topsoil, sand, and mulch. The bioretentions and rain gardens were planted in 2018 with 2 shrub species, inkberry and winterberry, and 4 herbaceous perennials, switchgrass, blue flag iris, goldenrod, and aster. This is one of the bioretentions after 1 year's growth. And then this photo was just taken recently in June of 2020. Here's the rain garden after 1 year's growth, and here's the rain garden now in June of 2020. LID offers a great opportunity to educate the public about stormwater issues. This is one of the signs that we post at our LID practices. This particular one is next to one of the bioretention gardens at University Towers. And here is one of our smaller signs that's posted next to the rain garden.
Moving on to the Northwood Presbyterian Church, where one bioretention facility was installed at the church, providing stormwater treatment for the entire parking lot.
The bioretention at Northwood Presbyterian Church has enough storage capacity for the full water quality volume, or 1 inch of rainfall in 24 hours. Soon after the bioretention was installed, it was put to the test as we experienced a heavy thunderstorm that produced 1.1 inches of rainfall in less than 1 hour. The storm filled the bioretention to capacity and was just beginning to flow out the overflow riser. All water captured in the bioretention had drained down through the soil media by the next day.
The congregation and pastor of the Northwood Presbyterian Church say they are happy with the result.
I think it's certainly capturing and holding water. We're having much less flooding behind our building. The plants, I think, are what we find attractive. We don't have a very attractive parking lot. Our parking lot needs to be redone, and so it's nice to have something that's attractive at the end of our parking lot.
Construction of all 13 facilities was completed in July of 2018. Breewood Road Bioretention. Formerly a breeding ground for illegal dumping and litter, the western end of Breewood Road was cleaned up and a natural surface trail was created with the help of Northwood High School students, Montgomery County Parks, the neighbors of Northwest Branch, Friends of Sligo Creek, and other community members. The area now boasts the Northwood Chesapeake Bay Trail and an attractive bioretention providing stormwater treatment of 7.1 acres, 2.1 acres of which are impervious surfaces.
To provide full water quality treatment for such a large drainage area, the Breewood Road Bioretention has a large filter surface area of 4,000 square feet. To make space for the bioretention, 1,800 square feet of pavement was removed as illustrated by the crosshatched area on this plan sheet. 50 feet of roadway was removed and a new cul-de-sac was constructed. Excavation was to a depth of 5 feet, which was backfilled with gravel and soil media. Groundwater monitoring during the design process indicated the water table was approximately 10 feet below the surface. However, during excavation of the bioretention, groundwater was encountered, which forced us to make two design modifications. One, a perimeter drain was installed around the bioretention to keep the work area dewatered during construction. And two, upturned elbows were added to the underdrain to prevent lowering of the local water table. During periodic inspections since the bioretention was completed, we have not seen water draining from the upturned elbows, indicating that all water entering the bioretention is infiltrating underlying soil. Ongoing flow monitoring in the storm drain pipe upstream and downstream of the bioretention should help us better understand the hydrology. These are the upturned elbows. Note the plug insert at the end of the underdrain pipe at the bottom of the concrete riser. This gives us the flexibility to dewater the planting media if standing water or soggy media becomes a problem. To date, after 3 years, we have not had a problem with the bioretention not draining properly. Plant growth in the Breewood Road bioretention has been exceptional, as this series of photos shows. Several large canopy tree species were planted in the bioretention, including sycamore, swamp white oak, red oak, and river birch, which are helping to dewater the soil media. Signage explaining restoration efforts in the Breewood Watershed is posted alongside the Northwood hiking trail, which passes by the Breewood Road bioretention.
Construction of this project was completed in May of 2017. Breewood Manor Neighborhood Green Streets. 10 bioretention and rain garden facilities were designed and installed within the public right-of-way along Breewood Road, Fiesta Road, Tenbrook Road, and Tenbrook Court. Combined, these 10 Green Streets practices provide stormwater treatment for 1.8 acres of impervious surface. Ann English is DEP's RainScapes Program Manager.
I am going to talk about Breewood Manor's Green Streets Gardens renovation and the residential properties that were done through the RainScapes program. When the initial work was done on Breewood, there was quite an extensive amount of analysis, and the effort was to see how much runoff from private property could be diverted into some sort of green infrastructure RainScape garden. An extensive screening tool which ran the numbers and was then able to figure out that you've got 63% of the properties had opportunities. Unfortunately, we got a much lower percentage of participation because it was an older community, and it really was like cold calling. They didn't know they had a problem. They thought they might want to move. They weren't anxious to make landscape changes, but we did manage to get 3 properties to agree to allow us to install gardens. And I'm going to show you that on the gardens look one way when they went in, and then some of them have gotten better over time and some of them have not. So this garden is adjacent to the big bio in Breewood. It's directly adjacent to it, but it does get a lot of deer pressure because it's right next to the stream, and stiltgrass has really invaded this. In spite of that, there has been the mountain mint has done all right there, and so has some of the other wood asters that do bloom through the stiltgrass. We miniaturized the trench drain, which was used in the road in Breewood, and put it on a driveway and into this rain garden that was in the front yard, which is highly visible and is across from several 5 different gardens in the right-of-way, which we then retrofit back in 2017 after the initial 2014 installation. This garden is well loved, but the owner now has moved the native plants that we installed to the background and installed a fig as well as hostas, which he prefers in the rain garden itself. They are growing fine, but there probably should be higher plant density than he is allowing. This garden, on the other hand, which was installed in Breewood Court and has a pop-up that comes out of the downspout in the garden, has filled in beautifully from the initial sparse coverage and creates quite a color show throughout the early summer. and then it blooms again in the fall. The Green Street gardens that were put in are all rain gardens. They're all 4-foot deep excavations. They have sandy soil that were placed, and it was a big deal. This was our MS4 target watershed, and we really wanted these to go well. These gardens were put in, and then a few years later, things were not doing so well plant-wise, and the community wasn't really thrilled with them. So we decided we would do a pilot and see if a different approach to planting could get a better result without a huge amount of additional investment. So this was done very rapidly. We started in April and May of 2017, and by the end of May, the gardens were renovated. So we sent out a flyer. We showed people where it was going to be. These are the gardens that are going to be renovated, and proceeded from there. The initial garden, the reason this was selected, there were other gardens that might have been in rougher shape, and you'd say, well, these edges are clean, but the vegetation had been eaten by deer. It was in very poor condition in terms of providing green cover rather than mulch cover. So the steep side slopes were being undercut. The sod was starting to collapse. That didn't look like anything that people like to look at in the winter. The standpipes, which were observation wells, were very noticeable, and they would prefer that they had some winter interest. So we went with 3 different garden ideas. One, which I will show, is really, I would call it suburban stream valley. And the second would be a classic garden. And then the third, which was a novel idea, really was trees. So as to create a streetscape and see if we could, with ornamental trees, create something that would be more appealing without breaking the bank. So these 3 approaches were developed in-house by the RainScapes designers, my planners and myself. And then we got to work. This was Fiesta North, which I'm calling Suburban Stream Valley because it was very close to the stream, and it was in a very suburban setting, and it was going to be a little bit more casual. So the edges were still going to have a step out of grass. We were not really modifying the slopes. We were going to take off some of that sod and reinforce it because it was collapsing in a number of places. When we started it in April, it looked pretty open. There were river oats that had survived. That was about the only plant that had survived, actually. And we created a pattern. We added 2 large trees, 1 in each garden, and then we wanted to create repetition. We armored the slope where we took out the sod, and then we added in evergreen shrubs and evergreen ground covers that were interplanted in those stones and created a green living layer on the bottom. The other thing we did was we moved the sod away from the edges of the inlet so that it wasn't so hard to mow and created a garden edge rather than a hard edge. This suburban stream valley concept has filled in beautifully. The trees have grown well. We used a hackberry, and you can see the Magnolia virginiana. So we used bottomland plants. We used goldenrods and rudbeckias, and it's really full after 2 years, which is a big contrast to what happened the last time after 2 years. Just across the street, Fiesta South, is a classic garden. So you have these 2 gardens that were installed. They were very separated from each other. They had to step out. There was some erosion on that grass, and the shrubs were small, and there was a lot of open space. Even though it was clean, it wasn't very well covered. So in April, we got to work, and the goal was to unify this and turn it into a unit, to make it a garden that would be set off. And so there's a layering system that was designed in. And again, we used that idea that the inlet was going to have irises like on the other side on Fiesta North, and the inlet edges were going to be garden-esque rather than turf to concrete. And then the biggest thing we did was we added in these flags to make a pedestrian connection from the road to the sidewalk rather than to force them to walk through grass, and to allow them to have a feeling of they're walking through a garden rather than avoiding falling in the pit. In June of 2020, these gardens have done spectacularly well. They create 4 seasons of interest. They have beautiful flowers. And in the winter, there's something to look at. This was a fairly low-cost renovation for a big, big impact. And actually, there's some really high-quality weeds that are coming up in between the flagstones. Some of the penstemons have decided they like to grow there too. So then on Breewood Road, there are 5 gardens in a row, and they were all very steep, narrow. We did not reinforce the slopes with stones because that sod seemed to be in pretty good shape, but you can see this is how they were planted. And then the gardens in 2016, they actually didn't look terrible, but they were starting to get more and more sparse. And so every year, replacement plants were having to be added. Some of the shrubs had survived, and so we were really trying to figure out, what's my problem solver? How am I going to get through this? So what we did was we added trees. And we had never added trees into rain gardens, and we knew that the bottom was going to be an issue, so we put them on the side slopes. We created a repetition of patterns to unify the whole streetscape. So rather than be just a muddy mess for about 2 months of the year after the grasses got cut back, we alternated switchgrass and irises down the road. We had 3 red buds and then 2 service berries were the shrubs. And then we did use some Ilex glabra, and we added in sedges. We added dwarf cultivars of black-eyed Susan, and we were trying to create a feeling of canopy along a very open street, which was really sunny. So now in June, the pedestrian scale has been introduced. It's a pleasant walk. There are pockets of shade created by the new trees that are filling in nicely in the garden, and the ground layer is complete. So we feel that between the residential and the streets, that this has been a big uplift for the community, and we hope to do more work in many more neighborhoods.
Construction of the Breewood Manor Green Streets was completed in May of 2015. Breewood Stream Restoration. The Breewood Tributary originates from 2 stormwater outfall pipes that convey water from University Towers, Northwood High School, and University Boulevard. Following decades of high flows and erosion of the stream channel, new stormwater management in the Breewood Watershed began to offer relief. In 2010, the renovation of Northwood High School brought new stormwater management facilities that provide treatment for 9.3 acres of impervious surfaces on the high school property. Combined with the stormwater retrofit projects implemented by DEP, a total of 17.3 acres, or 65% of all impervious surfaces in the Breewood watershed, are treated as of July of 2018. This level of stormwater management offers good protection against further erosion and degradation of the Breewood Tributary. The Breewood Stream Restoration Project followed a design approach referred to as regenerative storm conveyance. The idea behind this approach is to promote the seepage of stormwater into and through a porous substrate comprised of soil, sand, and wood chips. Through this process, pollutants are able to be filtered out. A series of pools and riffles were also created to improve aquatic habitat. During and after storm events, water flows through the pools without eroding the stream channel. The stream banks were seeded with a mix of grasses and perennials to provide stabilization. Additionally, 315 trees and shrubs were planted throughout the 1,200-foot-long project to further stabilize stream banks and provide wildlife habitat. Construction of the Breewood Tributary was completed in May of 2015. A reason to celebrate. On June 8, 2019, nearly 10 years since the effort first began, a group of residents joined dignitaries from Montgomery County government, Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments, Friends of Sligo Creek, and Northwood Presbyterian Church to celebrate the completion of this significant environmental project that provides cleaner water for current and future residents of Montgomery County. In addition to being inspired by the speakers, those in attendance were provided with the opportunity to do a walking tour of the Breewood Watershed to see and learn how the new stormwater management facilities work to manage and clean stormwater runoff. Sligo Middle School LID Retrofit. DEP has installed LID practices at 11 schools throughout Montgomery County, all of which provide excellent opportunities for students to learn about stormwater management issues, as well as our local streams, rivers, and the Chesapeake Bay. Several teachers from these schools have reached out to DEP and asked for staff to visit with students and explain the purpose behind LID practices and issues related to stormwater runoff. Feedback from teachers and principals at these schools has been very positive and confirms the educational value of LID practices on school campuses.
At Sligo Middle School, 2 bioretentions were installed in 2017, which together provide full water quality treatment for 1 acre of the school's parking lot. As its name suggests, Sligo Middle School and the Breewood Tributary are both within the Sligo Creek Watershed, which is a tributary to the Anacostia River. This bioretention captures 0.2 acres of the parking lot on the east side of the school. And this bioretention captures runoff from the entire 0.8 acre parking lot on the west side of the school, just around the corner of the school in this picture.
Forest Estates Green Streets and RainScapes.
This was our first Green Street effort in the county, and Green Streets and RainScapes worked together side by side to try to retrofit a very challenged drainage situation. This is in the Anacostia River watershed, and it is slightly downstream from the Breewood area. Forest Estates right of way in RainScapes look like a nice streetscape, look like a cottage garden in some cases, and there are many places where people now love them, even though it was a challenging effort to get them into the communities. It was really like cold call, door-to-door salesmanship on the residential front. There was a lot of outreach, there were community walks, there was a lot of concern because the right-of-way was narrow. This particular home that was done is right below a large dam. So in addition to the stream that comes out of the bottom of the dam, there was no place for the CIP to go. And it was a very small yard. This was a very challenging technical accomplishment to put in a residential rain garden in this residential property. But it went in, and within a season, it had filled in very nicely. That same rain garden I showed you before has really gotten overgrown in a way but the residents like it that way. That you have to understand about a rain garden is on a residential setting, they're very personal, but when you're in the right of way, these gardens grow. They get a lot of water and the plants really take off. So you really have to plan for that when you're doing planting design in the right of way. These front yard rain gardens were selected rather than backyard because they were more visible to the public. They were chosen to meet the desires of the existing homeowner in that property, so that we worked very closely on the design with them, and it met their aesthetic preferences. And this helped reduce the pressure of the water running off that would have otherwise gone straight into the stream. Some of the first retrofits in the right-of-way were put into very narrow grass panels, and this meant that they had very steep side slopes. And this has caused us in the subsequent years to have both successes and then some redesign needs. This particular set right here looked great right away, but then deer pressure caused them to need to be reevaluated, and now they look like this a few years later. The ones on the left have shrubs in them, which are winter berries, and they've done really well. But the ones on the right with those beautiful black-eyed Susans, the deer really enjoyed them, but they're not eating the catnip that's down in them now. Maintenance is done on these gardens once a month, and it is done by our crews that are established through our contracting mechanism. And this was something that was a big concern. Some of the gardens required some augmentation and additional plantings. The plantings have gone in, and we've tried a variety of strategies. Initially, it was just adding more plants. Over time, we've adapted and learned which plants are too aggressive and which ones are not strong enough. And when these problems have arisen, then we've been right there to fix them. And this went a long way to building community confidence. Initially, there was a lot of skepticism. Our planners went out and put lights on them, but for people before trick or treat, so that the kids wouldn't fall in them when they were just. The staff really has gone out of their way to make this a comfortable experience, and now the community really likes them and talks about them. Once there's an issue that's identified, the county contractor and our staff and the maintenance department are really able to manage getting out there quickly and addressing them as they arise. These problems are solved. People are happier. We've gotten nice notes from the same people that sent us not so nice notes, and they're relieved and they're happy. Moving down in the same road, so Forest Estates and then Sligo Middle School are all adjacent to Dennis Avenue. Dennis Avenue, Green Streets, and the gardens were done as a design build, and this was done with in-house planting design and working with the engineering company. It was a very extensive project. You can see Sligo Middle School is just up there where it says Dennis Avenue, just above Sligo Creek, and Sligo Creek is a stream system that we've done a lot of restoration work over the years as a department, and goes all the way up to University Boulevard. So we're south of Breewood here, but in the same watershed. Dennis Avenue projects, you can see how many there are, and it was a multi-phase project, multi-year project. This is an overall map of the different sections, and I just want to highlight that sheet 3, which is the Lanark Swale, I'm going to talk about at the end. Because it was so extensive, we had to develop a whole series of special details, including inlets, curb extensions, a biotrench profile, and all of these, this is a 28-page document, were specific to Dennis Avenue. Just an example of some of the sketches and the detailed technical drawings that were done to highlight for each project, you know, where the curb cuts had to go, where the bios had to go, where we were going to adjust the intersection. Again, we had outreach materials that were created. The Green Streets in Your Neighborhood pamphlet was designed specifically with pictures of other Green Street projects that were in the county that we had built. We had community walks where people could walk and they could talk and they could voice their concerns and learn about what the planting designs would be and what the design and build process would be. This neighborhood went really well, actually. It's very challenging when they have so much water coming down this right-of-way. These plants were planted. This is early spring, and you can see the scour that is pulling away the mulch around the iris in one of the road bios. So the water would flow in and then it would flow out. These are very successful gardens over time. They actually did manage to stand up to the pressure. The iris filled in and the juncus filled in, and pretty much the switchgrass has not persisted as well as the other plants. But even in late summer and the winter, this simple plant palette creates a sense of identity along the street. And in June, it's really spectacular when the iris are blooming. Here's another shot down Dennis Avenue right after pruning. And I just want to draw your attention to where the leaves are piled up in front of the sign. That was a special inlet design, and the goal there was to reduce sediment that was getting into this bio. It's somewhat effective. It's got a flat concrete bottom, and it can be shoveled out with a number 2 shovel, which is very nice for the average maintenance crew. They usually have a flat shovel. So you can see how the sediment gets made to pause because it drops down, it's flat, before it's allowed to go into the bio. And then the check dams are concrete in this situation, and then there's cobble down below the first one. So the most highly impacted check dam is reinforced. Some of the other challenges were that we had a big median, and the median had the storm drain in it, and you couldn't change the elevation of the storm drain. And so one of the solutions then was to just acknowledge there's going to be a hump in the middle, and we'll create one U-shaped cell, which will capture water in this median, which was just a mowed grassy median with some trees. And now you have quite a display of evergreens and florals down the median almost all year round. In the fall, the community needed better visibility. There's another example of that inlet that's designed to drop sediment and that you can clean. And then at the bottom of the median was something innovative that we were trying, which were step pools. And these were not as successful initially as hoped. There's been a lot of adjustments to the pools themselves because they were causing standing water problems. The vegetation was slow to establish, but over time, there have been ducks swimming in there. The vegetation is establishing, and it seems to be working well. The final project I want to talk about is the sinuous swale at Lanark Way. It's a BMP 56. And it's really turned out to be a community unifier. We used our same story of stormwater sign that we've used on other projects. And the community went one better. They added their own neighborhood basketball hoop for all little and tall to have a ball. And this is stormwater management at its finest because it's really achieving that multiple benefit that green infrastructure is supposed to achieve. It was not an easy project to fit. This was a paper street. It was just abandoned right-of-way that wasn't being used. So retrofitting in the swale, lengthening the flow path to give maximum opportunity for water to soak in and be cleaned by plants as it was flowing down the swale has proved to be very successful. And I want to just draw your attention to the fact that once it leaves the swale, it goes under an outlet across the street and then back into another rain garden on the right side of the road, which is kind of cool. Some of the plantings in there, it's very lush, but one time the maintenance crew went out and said, man, that looks really great. And then they realized it was Kogan grass, which is a horrible invasive. It's the beige grassy tuft. And so all of that had to be ripped out. And we went on a field trip with one of the nurseries but that has done a lot with green infrastructure. And we had a really good educational experience both for them and for us because they had never seen something so fully successfully planted functioning in a community. The other thing that was added to this swale is that sidewalk. It's a porous concrete sidewalk. And that was a new idea when it was put in 2014. So this previously unused space is now valued and protected by the community. They don't want the pet waste just dumped on the side of the road. They've gone and gotten our signs to say there's no such thing as a poop fairy. They take walks on it. They congregate there. And this is treating 1.62 impervious acres at a very reasonable cost per impervious acre for a retrofit. And the check dams control the flow and allow that water to infiltrate and create a beautiful scenario for the neighborhood. In this case, stormwater has become a community amenity. They put up a little lending library, they put up a bench. If you ever go out there, people come out and they want to tell you all about it. They love this. They love the garden across the street where it comes out of the swale and comes back in. The metal bridging across there was a DOT requirement. And then if you pay attention to the green on the right side of the picture with the black-eyed Susans in flower, in the next slide, you'll see what it looks like in the fall. So in the summer, it comes out green. In the spring, before it's flowering, is on the left. And there are check dams all through it, but they're so subtle that the plants dominate, not the curbing. And finally, just one last look, fall in the sinuous swale. So the October skies asters are shining, and they set off those seed heads of those black-eyed Susans, and people can enjoy the pollinator corridor that this creates. We know that the stream is becoming cleaner, and this is something that has taken many years to accomplish, but will have benefits for many years to come.
Implementation of the LID practices highlighted in this video and many others would not have been possible without the dedication of staff at the Montgomery County Department of Environmental Protection, who work through many obstacles that stand in the way of bringing a project like this to fruition. The projects highlighted in this video are just some of the many projects completed to date within the Anacostia watershed that demonstrate Montgomery County's commitment to improved water quality in our local streams and in the Anacostia River.